Thank you, Shava. I do believe if anyone knows what money laundering is, you actually have to have physical money for it to be money laundering. Understating the value of money that you have is not money laundering. I would like to believe that all of us know that. Hulu, if you'll go ahead with your submission and then we'll go to Maya D. Sorry, guys, we're not taking any new speakers. We're about to shut down the space.
Thank you.
Hulu and then Maya D. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you, Dr. Matsanga, and thank you for the other speakers that spoke before me. I was in and out of the space, so perhaps some of the things that I'm going to be saying were said already by somebody. But I just want to take note of the point that was mentioned by Dr. Betha when she identified the issue of the FBI lady who mentioned the fact that the intention is to choke the country on in terms of its ability to trade in gold. And after that, before that, we saw Hopewell winning an award in Qatar. And now we also understand or know that the Al Jazeera itself is owned by Qatari people. So what a coincidence. And Hopewell himself has been running with this documentary more than any other journalist in Zimbabwe, more than any other journalist in Africa. And I think your guess will be as good as mine. So let us look at Qatar itself as a country. If you look at Qatar, they won the rights to host the FIFA World Cup. And in the process of building the stadiums for the Soccer World Cup in Qatar, there were a number of employees that died in Qatar. Human rights abuses in the building of those stadiums. The issue was never talked about. The Al Jazeera never released anything on that. I want you to read about that. There were people who even say that the World Cup should not go ahead in that country, in Qatar. They didn't want the World Cup to go ahead because of the number of people who died and the amount of human rights abuses that were reported on the ground by individuals, but nothing was reported by Al Jazeera to the extent that you see there was condemnation to what happened. So yes, indeed, we demand ethical leadership among our people. And I agree again with that one other observation by Dr. Betha again, where she was talking about the issue of the manner in which some of these individuals who represent us were talking in the documentary. That it is critical that we need to teach each other when we are, say, for example, leaders in government and representing our nation. That we need to practice high ethical leadership skills, where even the manner in which we speak must be able to also speak about the type of country that you represent and the type of hope that you seek your people to achieve in that same country. So we oppose corruption in all its forms, and we do not stand with anybody that is corrupt. We looking at Africa from Cape to Cairo, I have had this observation. There is not even one single country that you can say in Africa has managed to lift the majority of its people out of poverty. We continued, if you can listen to the story of Sister Truth from Eritrea, you listen to the story of Dr. Matsanga from Uganda, you listen to the story of many other people from Nigeria, from any other African country, you think that they are speaking the story of Zimbabwe. If you listen to the stories of South Africa currently and where South Africa is going, you can easily see the story of Zimbabwe there and the story of each and every country. So, can we honestly say that all these African governments, all these African leaders do not care about the development of Africa and they're so weak that they are not able to raise their economies? I don't think so. We have got a case study of Liberia, a country that was created by freed slaves from the United States of America, the so-called freed slaves.
Please
Liberia
prepare
today
your answer,
is
brother.
not a successful country. Liberia is a very poor country. But if you can look at the amount of money that they've spent in one particular country of Ukraine so far, 50 billion already. And I was reading an article in the past few days where the IMF, the World Bank, and many other partners have agreed that the reconstruction of Ukraine will require 400 billion. Imagine if you can take that 400 billion and divide it among our 54 African countries. We will be able to strengthen our reserves. We'll be able to strengthen our currencies. 400 billion for a single country. They will never dare to do that for any country. Let me give you another example. Today, as we speak, Kamala Harris, the Deputy President of the United States of America, is in Africa. We saw the pictures from Ghana, the videos from Ghana, where dignitaries in Ghana were being treated like slaves, being saved in a manner that is so embarrassing, so humiliating. You wouldn't watch that. This is the reality we see. And let me tell you something. Kamala Harris herself is going to go to Zambia, a country that has been touted as a beacon of hope by them, the Americans. Since the inception of the new president in Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, there
He's
hasn't
prepared
been,
to land, Hulu.
yes, there hasn't been any significant thing that has happened in Zambia except the fact that they lent Zambia 1 billion US dollars as a loan. And Kamala Harris is going to Zambia. I can tell you, she will not be going there with money. She'll be going there with words, empty words, praising Zambia so that we become divided. So if you can look and trace the history of the United States and all these other people in terms of their plans for Africa, you need to look at Libya. You need to look at Liberia. You need to look at what they've done in Syria and what they've done in Afghanistan, where they spent 20 years in Afghanistan fighting the Taliban and spent
Thank you,
20
my
billion
brother.
in
Thank
war.
you,
And after
sir.
that, they left empty-handed.
Everybody's been on this space for hours. We want to make sure everybody speaks. I need to let Maya D speak. So your last 2 words, Hulu, and we move on to Maya D.
Sorry about
Hulu?
that, Trisha. Sorry about that, Trisha. I just wanted to say they ended up leaving Afghanistan in the same hands of the Taliban after 20 years and after spending 20 billion wasting that money in war. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hulu. I wish you had been with us earlier. Thank you so much for a great contribution to this discussion. Maya D, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I just saw this space and then I jumped in because the topic was so attractive. As a Pan Africanist woman, I really love to see all Africans coming together and on the issue that's really matter to bring us together, especially when it comes to the outsiders. I know those medias, all mainstream medias, either Qatar, Al Jazeera, BBC, name it, CNN, all. I don't know if you guys have seen any good news that they can report about any African countries, regardless. We knew it. We all have weak and a different kind of dictators leadership in Africa, but with their weakness, uh, our countries, when each and single countries from Africa, when they be labeled as like, either like corruption or either with famine or either with every bad things that happening on the world, we don't want to be exemplified by that. Al Jazeera is number one enemy of the black nations across the world, especially African. I knew it when this Al Jazeera, even like a childhood, when they reported about like the worst report, they go dig out terrible things from each country to show the world. And the very good example I will tell you about Al Jazeera, how mean they are towards African people. One of my cousins, she used to work in Arab house in Qatar, and then while she was doing the kitchen, made like her daily duty at her madam's house, the madam, she never allowed her to watch any TV throughout her stay there in Arab country, but that day she called her from the kitchen to show her, look at you, your African country, they drink from the ground this dirty water. Are you complaining about this? She never got a chance to sleep. She never got a chance to just like self care. That girl working in the madam house, she testified to me in person when I was in my country. By the way, I'm originally from Ethiopia. I live in the United States. This media, this biased media from Western, either from Middle Eastern, from Europe, I don't care. But they never had a good news about Africa. And African just wake up, regardless of our differences, our whatever things, our situation. We have to have our own media to speak behalf of us. They just want us to fight each other on idea because they just buy agent from within us and then to fight against us. So we don't let this thing to happen in our beautiful earth. You know, we have that beautiful with mineral, with every gold, the diamond, all the green gold, we have it. But, you know, we lost unity. We lack like sense of, thinking. We lost our back of brain to think critically about Africa. Wake up. Thank you so much, Trish. Bless your heart. This is what I have. Thank you all for coming here. Just bring positive thoughts. Let's fight this enemies, externalists. Then we can focus on ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya D. Dr. Matsanga, we're about to close off our space. We're going to hear from Son of Mackenzie, and then our guest speakers are going to give closing remarks, and I will hand over the floor back to you.
Where is Mackenzie?
Yes, he's just going to speak for 1 minute, and then our guest speakers, Padare is going to speak as a proxy for Vawombe, and Bashona will give his closing remarks, and I will hand over the space back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Son of Kenzie,
No, thank you very much. I've been on a lot of Twitter spaces, and most of them have been bashing. I like the fact how Doctor put the foundations and put the housekeeping rules. And I want to applaud you, Tricia, for how you've handled it. It's been amazing. And to the ladies from Eritrea, Bertha, and the South African lady that spoke, I'm impressed and I'm really excited. And I would like to thank each and everybody who has contributed and said what they had to say. There's been a lot of learnings. But in closing, I would like to confirm and say to ourselves, Al Jazeera is not for us. And I stand by the word where I say we need to get rid of Al Jazeera. The fact that we also need to come together and set up our own media houses and tell our own African story is that it's exactly what we need to do. We should stop beating about the bush. We should stop being afraid of telling the oppressors what we feel. And we should stop being given rules by the oppressor in terms of how we should and should not operate. Their standards are not our standards. Let us start creating our own standards as Africans. I am going to leave off by saying thank you very much, but Al Jazeera should be banned, and I will no longer even watch a single footage of Al Jazeera. And I will not allow myself to be manipulated. And I ask my fellow African brothers, do not allow mainstream media to manipulate our minds as Africans. Hence, we are struggling in the space of broadcasting to create our own platforms because they will not allow us. And for us to be self-sustainable in that area of broadcasting, we need advertisers to create the revenue so that we can pay those bills. I think Doc will understand with me. So I call upon all African business people and men and ladies, let us join hands, let us support our own African business opportunities across, and let us form a group that says to us, taking this discussion forward, we are business people of Africa. And I look forward to meeting each and every one of you in person where we can discuss this. Doc, Trish, please facilitate that, whether it's not in the UK, obviously. Let it be in Eritrea or even in Zimbabwe itself. Let us meet, let us gather, let us get to know each other. I know some people have been raising emotions. To the gentleman who was using the words like bullshit, bull that, bull that. Pretty, you're very emotional, and the emotions overrun the logic behind the reasoning. And then, you know what they say, logic without reasoning, in terms of the marketing sense, is like winking to a beautiful girl in the dark. Thank you.
Okay. I take now this opportunity, Trisha, to invite Charles Mutama as our last speaker, and then I will not our last speaker. I will invite Charles as our last speaker. Then give Trisha a chance to say one or two words. Then I close. Then I allow my Tanzanian music to play, and we close. We have learned a lot. We have said at least somebody must have heard. Charles Mutama is the president of Patriotic Party of Zimbabwe, of Patriotic Zimbabwe Party, and he's here. He lives in the United States of America. It's very, very objective. I've been with him on several platforms. He thinks not like any other opposition parties, but he thinks like a real Pan-African party. Charles Mutama, let's listen to your views on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matsanga. Thank you, Radio Punchline. Thank you, Twisha, for co-hosting. And greetings to all Zimbabweans here, all Pan-Africanists who are here present. The Al Jazeera documentary has caused a lot of sensationalism, has aroused a lot of emotions in Zimbabwe and indeed on the continent. And I would like to comment that there are two things that are brought to bear by the Al Jazeera documentary. Number one are the mineral resources of Zimbabwe, and in this case, gold, which we are all aware has contributed to a lot of a friction between African nations and the West. And I can give a recent example of Libya, which we are aware to the fact that what led to the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi was the fact that he was moving towards a gold-backed currency. And indeed so. In Zimbabwe, we are aware Professor Muturi Ncube introduced the gold coin. And as Patriotic Zimbabwe's party, we are in support of the gold coin, and we are in support of currency backed by gold. Now, considering the history of Zimbabwe before independence and post-independence, we are aware of the fact that the colonial settler economy was upset by the land reform program, which was done. Of course, it had its challenges, but was necessary. And the attendant to the land reform program was the upsetting of the colonial economy, which interlinked mining, agriculture, and commerce, as well as the industry of Zimbabwe. Now, we have Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front government, which has been in charge of these reforms. And we have seen that there's been a process within the ruling party and by the Zimbabwean government to transform the Zimbabwean economy, or to move it from a settler colonial economy to a post-independent Zimbabwean economy, which empowers. For example, we have seen the emergence of artisanal miners, which is a step in the right direction. As a political party, we applaud efforts towards empowering artisanal miners, whom we are aware have been instrumental in the production of gold in Zimbabwe. And this has been happening under the watchful eye of the DBS company, which we know historically has dominated mining in sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, the British South Africa company has not rested even after independence. So this is the background that we find ourselves in as a nation. And once we begin to see, like what Marcus Garvey said, up you mighty race and accomplish what you will. The West witnessing the emergence of an indigenous capitalism. It's an affront to Western capitalism. Those are the facts that we are dealing with when it comes to the issue of the economy in Zimbabwe. It's a confrontation between an indigenous capitalism, which is a step in the right direction, economic self-determination of Africans, and in particular Blacks, owning their means of production, owning their own resources, has pitted Zimbabwe against the West, or against imperial machinations, against colonialism. So the struggle for the ownership
Tama,
of...
if you could just sum up in 1 minute your contribution, please.
Thank you. Let me sum up. I just wanted to give a historical overview of where Zimbabwe comes from and where we are today, and why there's been so much hullabaloo around the issue of gold in Zimbabwe. Why has there been so much hullabaloo around King Solomon's mines, as it were? It's because the ownership of gold, of the land of Ofe, is what is in contestation here. Once control of gold is not in the hands of white monopoly capital, there won't be any contestation. There won't be so much hullabaloo. So what we need to do as Zimbabweans is to make sure that we consolidate the gains of our political independence through economic self-determination and regularize the production, the mining, the refinery of gold in Zimbabwe. And we ensure that all people benefit from the production of gold that we should own as Zimbabweans based on the vision of the liberation struggle. It was political as well as economic self-determination. And I hope this will reverberate throughout Southern Africa, particularly in South Africa, where we have seen the emergence or we have seen the death.
Thank you, Mr. Mutama. Dr. Matsanga, if you allow the guest speakers just 30 seconds each, just to give us a main, and then I'll give my closing remarks and hand over the floor to you. Padari, if you could go first, please, and just give us, in 30 seconds, just a summation of our discussion today on Qatar and the gold mafia in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Trisha. Thank you very much, Charles Mutama, Patriotic Party of Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe Patriotic Zimbabwe Party Chairman. Thank you very much for the type of contribution. Above all, Trisha, I want to give you a chance to say something as we close. What is on your mind when you saw the Al Jazeera?
You know, Dr.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll tell you one big problem I had with that documentary. You know, when you look at the office of, say, a personal assistant with a CEO, that personal assistant is privy to, classified documents, the CEO's expenditure. Maybe she even organizes his diary. But you have to treat that office with confidence. And for me, I was disappointed with Hubert Angel's behavior because I believe that he could have done more to protect our leader's office. I think that the position that he held, I do not think he did service to. If you are, like I'm saying, a personal assistant, you're probably earning more than the average worker in a company, but you don't go around, showing your pay slip and saying, oh, look at me because I work with the CEO, I make more, I've got more benefits, I can do this, and I've got access to the CEO. But, you there's a decorum that comes with holding such a high position. And I feel that had his behavior been different, this lousy documentary would have had even less weight and even less hula baluba, as Mr. Mutama said, because he would have protected that office. But now, I think what's raising emotions, what's feeding into this frenzy is his behavior and how he treated the office of the president. I think more could have been done in that regard. I'm disappointed that our government was not given an opportunity to address any of the issues that were raised, to have at least one spokesperson to offer an overview on the processes. Today we learned about the processes involved with gold mining in Zimbabwe, that if you're mining gold, you're not allowed to be in possession of it. If you're in possession of it, you're either an exporter or you're a seller of gold. There are these checks and balances that have been put in place by our government to protect miners, to protect the mining industry, to ensure that the revenue is going back to Zimbabweans. So I believe that as a media house, Al Jazeera did us a huge disservice. It almost seems as though we're running a flea market for our minerals, which is not the case. There are processes in place, there are checks and balances to make sure that no party is aggrieved in the process. And again, like you said, Dr. Matsanga, whose gold was stolen? Has anybody complained that their gold was stolen? When we look at the money laundering issue, I think a lot of people do not understand. Like, there was a speaker who said that, he was implying that understating your funds is part of money laundering. You need to have physical money, physical dirty money to change, of which, if you cannot prove the source of your funds to be an illegitimate source, to be an illegal source of those funds, then it is not money laundering. And again, in Al Jazeera, they just pointed in a certain direction and expected the viewers to connect the dots, which means that there are a lot of dots that are being connected. A lot of disinformation has been disseminated and is leading to chaos within our country. I'm glad, Dr. Matsanga, that you are biased to one country in Africa, and I believe it's Zimbabwe. And I'm so glad that your bias with Zimbabwe has allowed us to have this discussion, has allowed us to open up our minds and to understand that this situation is not isolated just to Zimbabwe, but is a continental issue that requires everybody to be aware that we're all victims of the same monster. So thank you, Dr. Matsanga. Thank you to all of our listeners and speakers. Thank you for contributing to this discussion.